Hello everybody, welcome back to English Champion. I've been noticing something lately on my Substack, especially that's where I spend most of my time reading people's work and kind of participating in that little community there. I've been noticing that there's a lot of discussion about teaching methodology, and there's a lot of really good stuff. There's some not so great stuff. What I see as sort of an emerging trend is there's a lot of discussion about methodology. And that's all fine, and a lot of it's rooted, in good theory and in good science and all of that. So that's nice. The problem is that there's not a lot of demonstration. It's just, here's what the science says, here's what the brain does. So here's something you could do in your classes. It's like, okay, that's fine, that's good, but it's a little bit difficult for some teachers who are younger and learning this stuff to maybe translate that description into something actionable. And so for those of us who've been doing this for 25 years, this is all very basic stuff. Teaching is not hard, but if you're new or you've kind of been experimenting with your methods, it can be a little tricky, and you might be very confused about what you should be doing to maximize student learning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through some of my process. Now, I did this just on Thursday in written form. So if you want, you can go read that one. So I wanted to do one in written form and one in video form, and I'll probably do some more because I have some other video clips I can share. But the piece the other day was about kind of a study guide, a written plan, instead of me lecturing about it. It was all written out that teachers or parents can work through with their kids. And what I did is I went in and I annotated. I think I had 39 notes that I put in there going, here's why I'm doing this. Here's why I'm asking this question. Here's why I'm pointing out this passage in the text. Here's the follow-up question to that. Here's what I wanted to get. Like, I'm explaining my thought process. When I wrote it, this is what I do naturally. So I just wrote out that long study guide. Again, that it's part of a 12-course module thing. So there's a lot in there. But I thought, well, let me go back and explain to people how I came up with this, because if anyone else who's a teacher wants to do this, they need a little bit of a model to follow. So if you want to see an example of this in written form with a completely different topic, please go read my Substack post from Thursday about modeling, guided practice and discussion and all that kind of stuff. So there's a written form, but we're going to look at a lecture I gave probably, 7 years ago maybe. So this is old, but I want to show viewers, especially those who are teachers or parents who are helping their kids learn stuff, how this works. Because again, I've been doing this so long, I kind of just do this naturally, but there is a method in it. And sometimes you need to see it and have it explained in order to fully get it. And then you can practice it if you want to on your own. What this lecture is, this is actually a kind of an introductory lecture, because the activity that would go with it happens the next class. And so this whole lecture, an hour and 15-minute lecture, is introduction. Now, we're not going to go through all of that. Don't panic. We're only going to do like the first 15 minutes here. But much of the discussion on various platforms I see is about developing background knowledge, and all of that is true. You can't do any of the critical thinking stuff until you know stuff. I've talked about that for several years now, and other people are too, so that's good. But how do you go about building that background knowledge? How do you know what to include? How deep should you go before you get to the actual thing you're going to talk about? This is all what I'm about to show you, and what I'm actually going to do is show you how I build background knowledge for these first 15 minutes before I even get to the real knowledge of the actual lecture, which itself is background knowledge for the next class to come. So teaching is all about building up the kind of the steps to get to some ultimate destination. And the question is, well, what do the steps look like? And how do you make sure that you connect them in a coherent sequence? And so I'm going to walk you through how I do that. And again, it's not hard, but you have to have You kind of have to have a plan for this. You can't just wing it, and you have to have enough background knowledge yourself as a teacher to be able to pull this off. And not to put down too many teachers out there, but there's just a lot of teachers who don't have enough. They aren't knowledgeable enough about their own field, which then hinders their ability to teach that field. And so you have to be good at this, and hopefully this can maybe point some people in the right direction. And so, again, I'm just going to show you the first few minutes, but this is how I hook students. This is how I build incrementally the step-by-step process for where I want them to be by the end of this day, by the end of this unit, whatever it is, okay? Just as a bit more context really quickly, this is a guest lecture in a survey humanities course where it's sort of an integrated interdisciplinary course of, it's a lot of history and philosophy, and it's broken up by historical time periods. And so this is about the Romantic era. And so this is kind of the, Enlightenment up all the way up to the end of the 1900s. All right. So 1750 to 1900, something like that. And so the professors came to me and said, hey, we're doing this unit, this time period. We want something that's based on literature, because we not only need to talk about the facts of the history and some of the philosophical stuff, we need to get into some of the artistic movements as well. They discuss political stuff and theological, all humanities stuff. And so they came to me and were like, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, well, what can I do? And they said, well, we'll give you three days worth of lecturing. So you get 3 days. Like, you want me to cover 150 years in 3 days, okay? Of the Romantic era, which is a very important era for all of artistic production. And so they wanted to include a novel, and so I taught a novel for 2 days, first half and second half. And those are on my website as well. You can go watch those if you like, about A Tale of Two Cities. And I thought, well, the other thing that they really should know about, if they're going to truly understand the 19th century and the artistic, social, cultural, philosophical movements of that time, they should really have a basic grasp of Romantic era poetry. And so I thought, I'll do one of the lecture days on that. They said, great, do whatever you want. So I thought, okay, well, again, to build context, to figure out how do I even start to plan a lesson like this? And I had to think, well, for the most part, the students in this classroom, and this is a little kind of smaller auditorium that had probably 130 students in it. So it's not a little seminar class. It's not a tiny class for your majors. This is a gen ed class in a big room with well over 100, almost 150 students. Full disclosure, as in all colleges, but especially at the school I was at, probably 80% of those students shouldn't be in college. Okay. They don't care about school, and they're not smart enough to be in college. 20% are, but for the most part, they aren't. The students that are there, especially in this class, a gen ed class, these are business majors. These are people who want to go into counseling. These are some elementary education majors, poli-sci majors, like everything except English majors. Actually, when I built my English department at this university, it hadn't quite been finalized yet. So I didn't have any English majors in there. And maybe out of the whole 130 whatever students, maybe there were one or two who were education majors who wanted to teach high school English. So out of that many students, maybe one or two who actually had a personal investment in wanting to learn about 19th century poetry. Okay. So I'm talking to an audience of people who don't care at all about what I'm going to discuss. No, people do not care, and do not want to discuss or read 19th century poetry. Okay, so that's the environment that I'm going into, and for many teachers, that's pretty standard. You're talking, especially in a kind of a public gen ed environment, you're talking to students who do not care about what you have to offer, as opposed to an upper division class in your major, where those kids really like what you're studying, they can't wait to read, and all that stuff. This isn't that, okay? So this is very relatable. You're walking into an environment where you have to start from scratch. You have to get the students to immediately latch on to whatever it is you're going to talk about, and then you've got to hold them there for as long as you can. And in a big room, that's a bit difficult. And with a topic like this, it's a bit difficult. And so that's why I'm going to show you the little step-by-step process that I went through to try to pull this off. And the big the thing I had to think about was, well, how do I cover all of the Romantic era in an hour and 15-minute lecture? And so I had to narrow that down a bit and go, well, what would be the most valuable thing? And that's really what good teaching is. It's figuring out what's the most valuable thing I could possibly teach these kids. And it's not necessarily about, I need to accomplish the state standard for this week, Or here's my learning objective. It's like, yeah, we need to have objectives, but we need to focus our attention on what's valuable. What should people really know, and what might they care about? And so I had to think really hard about that. And I landed on, well, if we're going to talk about the Romantic era, really, we just need to cover William Wordsworth and Walt Whitman. And I'll use them, especially Wordsworth's Prelude and Walt Whitman's preface to Leaves of Grass, a couple other pieces in there as well to reference. And I'm going to focus on that because that outlines pretty much the whole philosophy that if you're going to understand 19th century artistic movements, especially literature, especially poetry, that's truly what you need to know. And so for a group of people who have little to zero interest in what you're going to talk about, you better make it very valuable, and you better distill it down to what's most useful. Okay, you don't need to get into the minutia when people don't really care, and you're going to sidestep things that are actually way more important. If you're going to talk about this, Wordsworth and Whitman are the most important that you should talk about, at least in my opinion. So, okay, how do I get there? How do I get a giant group of students who don't care at all about Wordsworth and Whitman to find this moderately interesting, and then make them want to read their poems so that on the next class period, we can actually have a decent discussion? Well, here's what I did. So we're just going to look at the very beginning, and you can hear, and I'll pause and walk through my thought process as I taught this so that you can see, okay, here's what this guidance looks like. All right. And I'm not working from a real lesson plan here. I have some notes written down, but that's mostly for my Wordsworth Whitman stuff because I have lots of passages that I refer to and bounce around the text a bit. But on my notes there, I probably have written down a couple little bullet points, and I just make sure, okay, I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to build on that to go to this idea, and that's going to lead to this idea. And at the end of this little segment, that's going to prepare us now for Wordsworth and Whitman. So that's my thought process. And so let's see how that plays out in real time. We'll do kind of like a live autopsy here, and I'll walk you through it. Okay, so here's the first few minutes of a lecture at the college level to a group of Gen Ed students about Romantic era poetry. Here's how I start.
Today we are looking at poetry of the Romantic era. It's my opinion that the invention of written language is the most important thing that has ever been done in the history of the world. And that's true. That's truly what I believe. There's nothing else that has been more important in the history of the earth than the ability to write things down and share ideas through a written form of language. What writing...
Okay, so oftentimes if you're going to kind of create engagement, the buzzword how do I get kids engaged? You can do that through questioning, you can do some sort of activity, but I'm in a room with 130 some odd kids. I can't really do, an activity because it's going to take time to set up. After they're doing it, it's going to take time to come back to the lesson I'm teaching. It can be a bit of a mess. Imagine how that is when you're dealing with younger students. Again, you could ask some questions, and if you look at my one of my previous episodes, I did that with my Ray Bradbury episode. I started with, here's how you could teach this lesson in a middle school class, and here's the kind of questions that you get students excited to answer where they're raising their hands. You can do that. Sometimes, though, what's a great technique is you start with a bold claim, and that's what I've done here, is start with something that students have never thought about before. I don't lie to them. Like I said, I truly believe what I said there, that written language is the most important invention in history. But immediately, when you make a bold claim like that, students who may have thought, wait a second, I thought this was about poetry, and they start leaning in and go, wait a minute, what? You're saying this silly thing that we call writing that any first grader can do? That's the most important thing that's ever been invented? What? They start focusing in. You've made a claim, and they're going, how are you going to support this? And so they're looking for me to explain myself. And so it already creates interest. So, the idea, again, this is older students. I think you could still do this with young kids, but we often think, to get kids engaged to start my lesson, I have to come up with some elaborate activity. It's like, no, you don't. Come up with a really good question to ask. That could start some discussion. Or here's just another option. say something that's a little bit off the wall. Now I'm going to explain that that's not off the wall at all. This is really why I believe this. But it's something they've never thought of before. So come up with something that catches their attention and makes them be quiet and go, wait a minute, what did you just say? Explain that. What do you mean by that? They're actually starting to become engaged right now. So there's my first little breadcrumb. All right. I can't feed them 19th century romantic era poetry in one bite. All right. Or one meal. It's too much and too big. I can't even have them, start chewing on Whitman and Wordsworth yet. All right. I've got to give them a little tiny taste. And so that they go, oh, that's pretty interesting. Okay. Well, and then I go to the next taste so that they follow me. All right. It's like little breadcrumbs. I'm giving them to follow me here on this journey where we end up eventually at the end of this little intro section at Wordsworth and Whitman. And now I've got them for the rest of the hour. So I'm laying all the groundwork. I'm building some schema here so they have things to refer to and arguments to wrestle with and things to start anticipating, because they know there's a lot to come. They know they're going to sit here for an hour and 15 minutes. And so they've got to figure out, or they're going to start figuring out, where's all this going? Where are you taking me on this little journey that started with this outrageous claim you said? So I lead from that to this.
Has allowed us to do, and what writing technically is it allows us to live symbolically. Writing itself is a collection of little teeny tiny symbols, right? And when you put all those little teeny tiny symbols together, they make words. And when you put those words, which are symbols themselves, together, you can start creating ideas and you can share those ideas. The things we write don't have any intrinsic value to them. The little shapes you make don't actually mean anything. But when we invented a way to have them symbolically represent something else, suddenly the whole world opens up to us. We can say anything that possibly could come into our mind, and even things we haven't thought of yet. We can invent new ways of communicating them.
All right, so I started with a bold claim about the importance of writing. And from there I led to, all right, well, why am I telling my students this? Well, because I want them to start thinking about symbolism and how we put meaning into the marks we make on a page. Because this is going to be a literature discussion. Okay, I've got to get to language and words eventually. Well, this is how I'm kind of shoehorning my way in. What I don't do is start, well, there's this thing called, written language, and there's pictographic language, and there's logographic language, and there's ideographic language, and going through the history of different styles of writing and what the little lines mean and all that. So boring. Start with writing is the most important thing that's ever been done. Here's why. It's because it's all about symbols. Why do symbols matter? Well, that's where I'm going next. So again, little tiny steps along the way where I'm building up the framework for students where they start to go, okay, here's a big idea. Why should I care about that? Well, that's where this is going next, because I've got to take these big ideas and I've got to relate it to them. Otherwise, they're not going to care. So how do I connect written language and symbolic, writing to them personally? Here's how.
So we live symbolically. We share ideas across continents, across centuries, because we have the ability to take a marking and have it represent something else. And we live these symbols every day. Our whole lives are dripping with symbolism. We just don't realize it. We don't pay attention to it. Everything we do is wrapped up in symbols. It's getting to the end of the semester. All of us some of us maybe, are getting a little panicky about grades. What do you think grades are? It's just a symbol. They don't actually mean anything, all right? For 97% of you, depending on what field you go into, no one's going to care. They won't. No one will care. It's not a symbol. It's not a defining quality of you as a person. It's just a letter. It doesn't really mean anything on its own. That's why I always encourage my freshman classes that don't worry about your grades. Your job at college is to experience and meet and learn as much as you possibly can. It's not about assigning a letter to it, because that is actually who you are as a person, is all the things you've done and all the things you've learned. That's what really matters. And so you're going to panic about these grades over the next couple weeks as we prepare for finals. And then in a couple more weeks, we have a graduation where, guess what? You're aiming to get another symbol. You're going to walk across the stage and get a piece of paper. It's just a piece of paper. Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't define who you are. You and your experiences are who you actually are. It's just a piece of paper. You might lose it over the course of your life. It might get lost in a box somewhere. Doesn't matter. It's just a piece of paper. And we hold on to that paper dearly so that we can someday get a job where we can go get more pieces of paper. It's just more symbols, okay? Our whole lives are revolved around symbols. You guys play sports. You ladies play sports. Why? To win a plastic trophy? It's just a symbol, right? Yet we care about it really deeply. You know, an Olympic gold medal, the value of the actual gold medal is only worth like $550. That's it. People devote their entire athletic lives to pursuing this thing that's worth, comparatively, almost nothing. Why do we pursue those things so much? Why do you guys chase trophies and awards so much? Well, it's because they're symbolic. They do have meaning in them. So, we have meaning, or we have meaning symbolized everywhere. I see one right here. Raise your hand if you have either a piece of jewelry or a tattoo that has a cross on it. Oh, look at all the symbols, right? Symbols everywhere. Why do we stand and sing at a piece of cloth in the gym? It's just a symbol. It's just a symbol, right? But we give it a lot of meaning. Why do people panic when there's fascists who throw Bibles into bonfires? It's just paper, right? But we imbue it with this meaning, that those words in here matter, that the ideas matter, and they last over long periods of time. So when we talk about poetry, and students get panicky that, oh my gosh, my teacher's going to talk about poetry, how boring, and it's too hard, and I don't understand it. You're living lives of poetry every day, you just don't know it. It's all around you. So what we're going to...
All right, so what have I done there? Well, I took something that students might not relate to, even though I got them to lean in and go, okay, what's he going to talk about here? That writing's the most important invention, and oh, writing is really just symbols? And okay, well, why is that important? How does that affect me? And I start giving examples that, no, we live all of these things every day. And I've got 10 examples I throw at kids where if one doesn't fit with that kid, well, one of the other ones will. And they start to go, oh, okay, so this idea of symbols, this is really an important part of our lives. We actually wear them. We participate in these activities where we have rituals with them, and we have certain beliefs about them. I do that too. This is kind of related to me and what I do every day. So I've taken something that is, a really big idea, and I've zeroed it down very quickly to something. Here's how this pertains to you. And even more importantly than that, what I said at the very end is, look, as I said, I'm trying to convey to these kids who have no interest in any of this, that there might be something valuable here. And so part of what makes students apprehensive, not only is it that they might not have any sort of interest in it, but they also might think it's just too difficult. After all, poetry can be difficult to read. And so there might be not only some inherent fear of boredom, but almost kind of fear of the thing itself, in this case, text. And so what I'm doing here is I'm saying, there's nothing to be scared of here. This is normal. All right. You're part of the world of symbols every single day. So when I talk about this new thing, because we're going to go to the next thing, here's the next breadcrumb called poetry. It's symbolic language, and some of the themes in there are meant to be representative of really big ideas. They're just presented in this symbolic way, and you can handle it because you've been handling these symbolic things all the time. You just didn't even think about it. So there's nothing to be scared of here. So let's tackle this together. So I've started with one step. I went to the next one. I've made it personal and relatable to them. And now I'm starting to move them towards, okay, this lecture I'm about to give is actually about poetry. I've given a bunch of examples, and I've kind of gotten the kids to giggle about it and go, oh, I didn't think of that. Yeah, that's true. I didn't remember that. And I prepared by having some cash in my pocket so I could, use it as a little prop. So I've already thought through all of this. All right, I'm leading them purposefully to where I want them to go, which is eventually, we're going to get to Wordsworth and Whitman here in a minute, but I can't just start with them because they don't know who those guys are. They don't know where they fit in the context of literary study of that era. They don't know what their poems are about. So I have to introduce them gradually before I ever get there. And for an hour and 15-minute lecture, as I'm going to show you, introducing them takes 15 minutes. All right. Before I even get to the lecture, it's going to take that long to ease my way into this conversation and get them to trust me and get them to be confident that it's not going to be overly scary, that this is going to be valuable for them, and that when I have them do this on their own for next class period, they can do it. So I'm trying to make it relatable, build a little confidence, as well as we'll get closer here, further along here, build the actual content knowledge about the time period and about the philosophies and all that, that I'm going to go deeper into here in a minute. So keep tracking the step-by-step process for how I'm building the schema for these students.
So what we're going to try to do is we're going to see if we can heighten our senses a little bit, to pay a little closer attention, to see what symbols these authors have to give us, and maybe they can point us towards, how we might improve our lives in some way.
So what I always do too is I'm constantly pointing towards, all right, so here's why we're doing this. Here's what's coming up next. I told you this because in 10 minutes I'm going to talk about this. Or I'm telling you this today because on Thursday we're going to talk about this. Always pointing students toward where we're going so that they can see that, one, I have a plan for this. I'm not just winging this, but also that there's a method to this for their own learning, that there is a destination, and to get there, we've got to go on this path that I'm laying out for us. And I'm doing it purposefully for them so they don't get overly confused and don't feel like I'm throwing too much information at them and all that stuff. And I'm making it applicable to them that they'll actually kind of care about this. And I lay out the big goal, which is a very simple one, which is simply that I hope they get something out of it, that there's something by the end of the day or by the end of the week that they look at these poems and these authors I'm going to talk about, that they go, okay, I see why these people are considered to be really good. And better yet, I can see how this stuff, even though this was written 150 to 200 years ago, how this actually applies to me. And that's pretty cool because I hadn't thought of that before. That's really about as basic as I'm getting here. Okay. When you're in a situation like this where students don't know anything and you're teaching them something that's not the most entertaining thing in the world, like, just appreciate it. And let's see if we can figure out how this applies to you so that you'll care about it at least somewhat. If we can do that, I consider that a win in a situation like this. So, okay, I've laid a lot of groundwork so far. Where are we going next?
We need to read poetry because we need to participate. The medium that something is presented in affects the meaning that it has in it. And art is the best example of that. You have to listen to Mozart to actually appreciate it, or to even have a glimpse, a piece of understanding what he's trying to accomplish when he composes a symphony or an opera. You have to actually listen to it. Professor Kent, as smart as she is, and as well as she explained those pieces to us and what the structure of those pieces were, she had to play them for us because it doesn't matter how well you explain it. We have to hear it. You have to look at a Monet painting to actually understand what he's trying to accomplish, or a Picasso painting. I can't just explain those things to you and have you go, oh yeah, that's what a Monet painting is. No, you have to actually see it. The same is true with poetry. You have to actually read it, or any form of created literature. You can't just have someone go, this is what it was about. It doesn't work. It does work with other things like history. We can tell you when things happened. We can break down philosophical ideas for you. There are fields where it is okay to just explain stuff. That's fine. But for things that are created, like art, you have to actually participate in it. So when I or other teachers ask you to read things, it's kind of for a reason. You have to actually do it in order to get the full meaning out of it. I can't, as well as I'm going to try to explain all this stuff to you today, it can never do it justice to you actually reading it yourself. So I encourage you, if you haven't yet, make sure you look at the poems that I've posted. I'm actually going to post a couple more by Thursday to get us prepared for our discussion. You have to actually read them because explaining them doesn't do it justice. All right?
All right, so every teaching lesson is really a sales pitch, okay? And while I've kind of made it a little bit fun so far, where, I talked about the symbolism, everybody's got symbolism and all that stuff, and I start leading them toward actually talking about poetry, the thing we have to be clear about is, yeah, but you actually have to read this. You can't just sit here during my lecture and go, oh, I guess I know what 19th century poetry is about. You have to participate. And so that's the urging that I'm hoping for here, because the next class where we were going to talk about the poems, I don't want students showing up that day going, oh, I'll just sit here quietly because I don't really want to read this stuff. I have to make that little sales pitch to drive home the point that your education, and especially when it comes to art, is participatory. You can't just sit there and expect everything to be handed to you. And there's other teachers in the audience there from the other fields, and I constantly will refer to those other professors, as well as the lectures that came before, like that music lecture and other art stuff that had come before mine, to show how what I'm talking about is connected to all the things that the other teachers have talked about. Okay, this isn't like some random divergence where they just bring in this guy to talk about literature for a day for some reason. All of this is connected, and I've been listening to those other teachers too, and so I'm going to make sure that I place my ideas in the context of what other people have said. Sometimes they're going to be a little bit different than what they said, or how it's explained, like with history and philosophy. Other ways, like music and painting, it's going to be very similar. So I'm always placing what I'm talking about in a context of what other people have talked about. And again, always pointing towards, well, what's the next thing we're doing? Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a discussion about this Thursday. So you better read so that you know what we're doing here. Okay. You have to participate in this. All right. So I've kind of laid a lot of the groundwork. Am I ready to talk about Wordsworth and Whitman yet? No, because we still need a little bit of practice at this. And so I've kind of laid the foundation of, we're talking about written language, and we're talking about symbols, and we're placing this in a context of other fields, and you actually have to be the one who does the reading, and all of this is really important. But now, instead of just diving right into the complicated stuff that Wordsworth and Whitman are going to talk about, let me ease my students into this discussion by walking through an example with them. What's also happened here is, we've gone 6.5 minutes of me just talking. And so even though this is a lecture class, I also want them to have a little bit of back and forth as well. And so I'm going to introduce some discussion here. I'm still the one in charge of the discussion. I do not do, okay, let's do a turn and talk. Let's do some group activity. No, I'm in charge of the group. I'm going to lead this discussion. That's what a Socratic discussion is about, and that's what I usually do. I don't often do these big lectures like this. My classes are much more Socratic, where I'm just peppering students with questions for 45 minutes straight. So I want to move toward that so the kids aren't just sitting there the whole time, and I want to demonstrate for them how we read this, because again, yeah, I've laid the foundation of why this is important and how it might relate to their lives and all that stuff, but how do you actually go about doing this? Well, let's practice for a few minutes. So that's the next step. Let's take a look.
To get us started with actually reading poetry, we're going to start with a poem. And then we're going to get to our two key authors for the day who really define what this period is all about.
So again, I'm always signaling, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to show you how to do this so it's not so scary, but we're eventually going to get to this other thing, and that's going to be the big thing of the day. And so everything is a preparation for the next thing. And again, I give the students those little signposts, like tell them what's coming. That way they know that, okay, if something's coming up, I better pay attention now because he's probably going to refer to this later. And if I miss it now, I'm going to be confused. So he knows where he's going. He wants me to know where we're going. So I better pay attention. So always give kids signs of, okay, here's what's coming up next. That's what I do here. So let's do a little practice.
So we're going to look at a piece from Emily Dickinson that's super short to get us started. As Professor Harris talked about during his art presentation, when we say the Romantic era, we're not specifically pointing to a concrete time frame. Anything based on ideas doesn't just pop up in one day or 1 year and then stop in 1 year. There's always a movement across time. So even though I have on here the dates of 1800, 1850, add a decade or two on each side of that, because ideas are never just in one place. They always change, right? So these dates aren't exactly hard and fast dates.
Just real quick. So, I referenced a teacher that had spoken a day or two previous. So again, the students know, I know what the other professor said. I'm connecting these ideas to what other professor said. These ideas we're talking about are not in isolation. Everything you're learning is related to each other, and also clarifying for them that, the terminology we use isn't always as precise. Sometimes we use it just kind of as a catch-all. So, we have to just be flexible with this and don't be too hung up on, well, this isn't the right time, or this author doesn't fit in that time period, or whatever. It all kind of gets just pushed together, especially when I'm just doing a quick overview. And that's important to kind of acknowledge for students. Things are a little messier than sometimes what they think they are.
So we're going to look at a piece that's a couple years outside that boundary, but I would still consider Emily Dickinson a romantic poet. So we're going to look at this line by line. It's super short, but maybe it'll give us a glimpse into what at least her version of poetry might be, and we'll see if it aligns with what some of our other authors today believe about poetry.
So we're looking at Emily Dickinson here, and I've taught Emily Dickinson for a number of years. I'm not the biggest fan of hers, but I thought, what's the best piece of poetry I can use that's also very short, because I got to get to this other stuff, that illustrates the point I want to make and is a good connection to where I'm going for this class. So, even choosing her and this poem that we're about to look at, that's all done very much on purpose. And again, it might not be something where it's like, oh, I picked her because she's my favorite poet. No, you pick what's most useful and most valuable. Again, I do like Walt Whitman. Is Wordsworth my favorite British poet? Probably not. But you use it because we know that's the most valuable. And so that's really the key to education. It's not about, well, I need to cover this, or I really like that, so we're going to talk about this today. It's like, no, what's the most important thing? And that's what you focus on. And so this little piece that we're going to look at is the link. What I felt like in that moment was the most important link between my intro stuff I talked about and then the actual lecture that's coming up here in a few minutes.
So let's take a look. First line. We're gonna look at this very closely. Justin, when you read that first line, what do you see? What do you think that first line might mean?
Okay, so I called on this kid, if I remember right out of the gate. Okay, so I do that on purpose. Sometimes I ask for volunteers, which I'll show you. Sometimes I ask direct questions. And even though you're probably not going to be able to hear any of their answers, that's fine. It's about my questions I'm asking that's most important. And I call on kids, especially at the very beginning, who I think probably aren't paying close attention. Maybe I saw that kid fidgeting or looking down and not paying attention, not locking eyes with me. And I was like, I need to wake that kid up. I need to make sure he's on the ball so that everyone in this room of 130 people know that they could be called on at any second. So they better be paying attention. So, I think I startled him a little bit, but, he does a fine job. But this is how I start. I have you read it out loud. Tell me what you think.
Tell the truth, but tell it to where it'll help you in the best way.
What does the best way mean?
Most greatest outcome. Just tell it how they'll help you.
Help who? The reader or the author? Who are you talking about?
I read it as advice.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so notice a couple of things I do there. And I do this whenever I'm asking students questions. One, I will stand there and wait for you to answer. You cannot get out of it by stalling or going, oh, I don't know. Nope, you will not win a stubborn contest with me. I will stand there for the entire hour and wait for you to answer. So kids are on the hot seat and they know I better say something. And as I will show you here in a second, I don't just say, don't be scared. We're going to work on this together. So I just want to hear your thoughts, and but you will answer because I asked you a specific question. But also notice what I do is I make him clarify certain words. I'm so picky on, what do you mean by that? Who are you talking about? Who is he? Who are they? Which group are you talking about? What do you mean? Constantly making them clarify. Be specific. Do not use vague terminology or try to just, again, try and get away with something very simplistic. I will challenge you on a teeny tiny word to make sure you're saying something that's quite clear and that we can work from a content standpoint in our discussion. All right, so I'm moving on from him. I'm going to give a lot of kids a chance here.
Right here. What do you think it means when you tell something at slant?
I'm in this class. I've had a couple of these kids in, other semesters, but again, this is 130 some odd kids. I don't know everybody. And so there's some kids I might call by name, but other kids I don't. But everyone has to be ready to answer.
Not all of it. Why would we want to tell the truth, but not all of it? What do you mean?
Be sensitive to those around you.
Okay, be sensitive.
So again, constantly, what do you mean by that? Clarify it for me. Go further with that. I never let kids get away with a one sentence answer. You constantly keep pushing until you get something way more specific from them.
What else? Slant. Who has an idea? What does slant mean in this line? Take a stab at it. There's no wrong answer. What do you think?
Well, I think there might be a wrong answer, but
There are wrong answers, but I'm open. Go ahead.
slant such that it's true, yes, but you're constructing that to try and present a certain view that may not necessarily be there. You're just presenting raw facts as they are.
Okay, good. So maybe it's intended to maximize our information. Maybe it's intended to cover up some things, even though we're going to be truthful. Maybe it's a way of doing it not directly, not head on, but sort of at an angle. I'm gonna bend it slightly for you to see if that helps you understand better. Let's see if those three hypotheses follow through.
Okay, so really quickly right there. Notice what I did there. Again, I don't even think about this. I just do this naturally, okay, where, I got three answers. Some of those answers were better than other ones. But the way I summarized it, I said, okay, so far at this point, we've read one line, and we'll see. Maybe it's this, and I kind of summarize one of the kids' answer in kind of a better way, or a way that makes more sense than maybe even he said it. Maybe it's this, and I combine all of them so that I show the students that even if your answer wasn't as strong maybe as someone else's, it's still valid, and we can combine it to maybe build a stronger meaning overall. If no one has nailed it quite yet, maybe if we combine all of them, it'll actually end up being strong, a strong interpretation. And so that kid, even though his answer wasn't perfect, it actually does contribute to our overall understanding. And as I just said again, let's see those hypotheses you just offered. Let's see what happens next. So now the kids know, okay, I said this, the teacher kind of validated it, so maybe I'm on the right track. And he said, well, let's see if we're right. Okay, so now I'm watching the screen. What's the next line? Like, this is the engagement, all right? And you can do this in a giant classroom. It's not hard, but it's these little tiny techniques you can use. And again, I just do this naturally. I don't even think about it while I'm doing it. But this is how you keep kids engaged and want to answer your questions and then follow along with what you're going to show them next. So let's keep going to the next line.
Success in circuit lies. What do you think? Red sweatshirt. What's your name? Yeah. Lauren. What do you think that next line means?
Notice what I sometimes do here is when I ask a question and a student doesn't quite, they don't have an answer right off the top of their head, I'll often kind of walk away, or I'll act like I'm doing something else. Maybe in a classroom I might go over and pick up a marker from the desk, or I'll open the book and kind of flip pages acting like I'm looking for something. What I kind of, again, unconsciously do that, where if you're asking a question and then you stand there in front of 130 people and stare at that kid, well, they're already a little bit intimidated by being in this giant room. And so if you kind of play it casually and sort of ask and then kind of wander away a little bit and, kind of give them the room to think for a second and not feel like you're staring at them and everyone is looking at you waiting for an answer, gives them a chance to process. And I don't know. I don't really think about it, but this is why I do this, where it's not that I'm ignoring the kid or kind of dismissing her. I'm actually giving her space to think and take a little bit of the pressure off her, because again, she wasn't ready to talk. I called on her, and so I need to give her a little bit of room to answer.
Good. Okay. So what does circuit mean here, you think?
Like maybe if you're telling it in slant, then you're like bringing it back to the beginning to what you want.
Okay, very good. What else? Unity? Okay. Good.
Okay, so just really quickly there, one, I asked her, explain that? What do you mean by that word again? And notice what's already happening is, even though I haven't asked someone else, other people are starting to answer. Like, people are now volunteering because they see that we're constructing something here. And if you have an idea that's helpful, You can offer it. At the college level, I don't always make them raise their hands all the time. It's a little more free flowing. And so at the beginning, students were quiet and waiting and not sure. Now, after 4 kids have answered, all of a sudden people want to volunteer. And so this is how you create, this is called engagement, okay? And I didn't do anything flashy. I didn't do any sort of crazy activity. I don't have students like doing some cell phone, interactive thing on the screen. I don't have them in group work and no turn and talk. No, they're engaged. They're volunteering to talk in front of 150 other students. Not because what I'm doing is so entertaining, but because they're seeing that we're building an analysis of this piece of literature together, and there's freedom in responding. And that's a good environment.
Now, Dickinson capitalizes that C in circuit, and you might think, ooh, maybe she's trying to emphasize that a little bit. Maybe. She also capitalizes all sorts of weird words, so it's hard to tell. So this word circuit is kind of a weird word. Circuit does mean bringing things together. If it goes all the way and comes around, circuit does mean, could mean circle, but it means a way around, right? If you take a circuitous route to a destination, you kind of take the long way. You go around a bit. You don't go directly to it. So this circuit idea is fitting with our slant idea that it's not direct, it's not straight on, it's not blasting the truth right in your face. It's maybe we're gonna just dance around it slightly. Notice the word lies. Kind of an odd word here because lies can mean 2 different things. What are the 2 ways we can define the word lies? Lying down. Okay, so this is where it is. This is where the success exists. This is where it were to lie down if it were. And also it's not truthful. So could it be that truth, when it's presented properly, might also, in a way, be not maybe fully lying, but at least somewhat deceptive? Perhaps. Or it could just be where it is, that it's found in the way around, not straight through. Let's see if she keeps going with that.
All right, so again, summarizing what the kids have been talking about, emphasizing that we look at poetry word by word, especially in a piece that's this short, that this is how we read poetry. We go line by line. We look at every word. Sometimes they're signified in some way, like having a capital letter. Sometimes words have double meanings. We need to be aware of that. I'm demonstrating them out loud in front of them. Here's how we go through it. And we can do this together, but you're going to have to do it on your own for next class. So this is the practice I want you to be doing. So I'm kind of modeling, but also getting them to practice at the same time. And again, even in a giant classroom, this is how you do that.
Too bright for our infirm delight. It does rhyme. Bridget, what do you think, Bridget?
Maybe that it's like just too good that we can't really believe it.
Too good.
Too good, like it's too bright, like it's too good.
What is? The truth?
Yeah.
Okay. How can truth be too bright? Don't we want truth to be bright and illuminating and helpful? We can't handle the truth. All right. Jack, all right. About the word infirm. Want to know the quick definition of infirm? Could be diseased. Means weakness usually. It could mean unstable. Has a couple different meanings actually. So success in circuit lies too bright for our infirm delight. I think we're on the right track. I think maybe if we are too truthful, if we're just too blatant and honest and just giving facts to people, we won't really be able to understand it enough. We've got to present it in a way that seems like it's not being accurate enough, but ultimately we hope it will be. Let's see if she proves that for us.
So as you can see, I'm mixing a little bit of lecture with discussion where students say things and then I kind of package it the way that I want them to think about it, where I'm like, okay, you're kind of on the right track here. Let me say this a little more clearly so that everyone understands it better and that I can point us toward what I know is coming next. And so, a discussion with a class, even if it's a big class, doesn't have to just be kids talking the whole time, and you lecturing doesn't have to just be you talking the whole time. You can mix this together, and it's not hard. But in this way, the students get to have their voices heard, but also they get to hear you, and especially you get to clarify their ideas for them, which is what a good teacher does. Kids often, again, they're on the right track, but even they don't always understand what they're saying. And so a good teacher comes along and says, here's what I think you're saying, and you're close. Let me nudge you in the right direction a little bit more, and now you'll get it. All right, so I'm kind of helping you along.
The truth's superb surprise as lightning to the children eased. All right, in the black hat. What do you think? That's you, man.
All right, so that kid, I don't think, if I remember right, wasn't paying attention. He was probably doing something else. He wasn't looking at the screen. He wasn't looking at me. And I'm like, well, I'm calling on you next, buddy. And so I think I startled him a little bit. And but that's what you do in classrooms, that if you're looking and you can tell who's not with you, well, that's who you call on.
What's your name? Okay. As lightning to the children eased. What do you think about that line?
So again, you can tell, I can tell just remembering back that he probably wasn't. And that's why I had to, well, let me get to know your name. So it's a little more personal. And let me repeat the question, because clearly you missed it the first time. So again, I'm not insulting him. I'm not saying, pay attention. You just kind of gently say, hey, I can tell you're not with us. So here's your chance now to prove to me that you can handle this.
You're a kid and you heard or saw lightning and heard thunder. What'd you think about it? Inside? It's a little scary. Did your parents ever tell you anything about it?
So he's one who's trying to wait me out. He doesn't really want to answer. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe he's just like, I don't care about this. I'm just going to ignore it and see if he'll call on somebody else. But I don't. I rephrase the question in something that's way easier so that he's more likely to have a response. Let's see what he does.
No, never? Wow. All right. Helpful. Helpful parents. All right. Anyone have their parents tell you something about lightning and thunder? What? Someone tell me.
All right, so he didn't really have much of an answer, but he knows now that I caught him, that he really wasn't paying much attention, and we kind of just made a bit of a joke out of it. But we're going to move on to the rest of the poem.
Okay. That's what? God's bowling. Okay. All right. That would be a superb surprise if that were happening.
All right, so this is where I was a little surprised that no one had a discussion, or if they did, they had forgotten. No one had a discussion with their parents about what lightning and thunder is. That surprised me a little bit. And so sometimes you're going to ask questions where you don't get the replies that you thought you were going to get. And as someone who's always prepared, like, well, I have a story. So if you're not going to have something, well, I do. So let me share with you, this way of interpreting thunder and lightning that Emily Dickinson's writing about. And let me push you to where we're going. So you always have to have a backup plan, and I always have a little example ready to go if the students don't have their own. So here's my example.
When I was a kid, my dad would tell me, because I didn't like loud noises when I was a kid. I didn't like fireworks. I didn't like thunder. I just didn't like loud things. I've gotten better with it. But when I was a kid, I would get real scared at night if there was thunder and lightning. And so my dad would say, well, just when you see the flash, listen for the thunder, and that's about how far away it is. And then it's not happening right over the house. It's miles away. It's nothing to be scared of. There's you don't have to worry about it until you can start counting and you hear that it gets closer, and then you get a little more scared. So I have no idea if that's factually true or not. Probably not. I don't know. But it's helpful. It helps. It's probably not true, but it did ease my mind as a kid to know that, the lightning isn't dangerous as long as you're inside. And in fact, it could be really far away.
No, I do know that distance part is true, but I think there's probably a lot more to it. I just don't, and my dad doesn't know the physics behind all of that, but it is a good little trick for kids to know.
With explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually. So as we said, maybe we shouldn't tell you exactly what's going on all the time. Maybe if we present it in a way that's a little circuitous, a little easier to handle, it might actually be more helpful for us. Or else every man be blind. Maybe we can't handle some truths. They're too big and too powerful. If we tried to actually understand it, we wouldn't get it, or it would be too scary. My dad would have sat me down as a 6-year-old and told me what lightning actually is. It probably would have freaked me out. It comforted me instead to have him tell me this thing about lightning that was maybe not completely truthful, but I understood it enough to be able to not be so scared. So there are truths in this world that are incredibly powerful. In fact, they're so powerful, maybe we can't even clearly understand them sometimes. But maybe poetry, or the job of a poet, is to present those truths in a way that might seem like we're taking the long way around, where you think, oh my gosh, why are you being so descriptive? Why don't you just tell me what it is? Maybe the poet might be thinking, I can't just tell you what it is. You wouldn't get it. I need to present it in a way that you'll actually appreciate it. Maybe that's what Ms. Dickinson is trying to do here. And we'll see if it aligns with what our poets who started this movement called Romanticism were trying to do as well.
So that is how I ended that portion of the lecture, and now I start getting into Wordsworth and Whitman, and the details of the actual poetry of the time period and the philosophies that emerged out of the Enlightenment and then pushed us towards the 20th century. So what you notice there is even my explanation of all of this is sort of what Emily Dickinson offers, that I'm kind of going around the edges here. I didn't start the lecture by going, okay, today we're going to talk about William Wordsworth and Walt Whitman, and here's what they did. Like, the kids would have gone, I don't even know what you're talking about yet. I've never heard of those dudes. I don't really like poetry. So what are you even saying right now? I had to come at it from a little bit of a slant, a little bit of a circuitous route, and now I've got them pretty well engaged. I've got them laughing a little bit. I don't have to put on a show and make a bunch of jokes, but they're with me enough to catch little subtle comments. They're listening to their peers, and so far it's going well. And we're 15 minutes into the lecture. I've got an hour left, but I think I've built enough, not complete background knowledge, but at least some references that they can now see where we've come from and where we're going. And they know that, okay, some of the things that the teacher has talked about here are probably going to show up in not only the rest of this lecture, but the poems we're going to read for next class. And so this was pretty comfortable. This 15 minutes went pretty well. He didn't say anything that was overly scary. He walked us through this poem and it wasn't so bad. So maybe I can handle this. In fact, maybe I might even enjoy it. So that's how you introduce something brand new to students. And if these kids were in some normal class, like if it was my normal American literature class or whatever, and we had just talked about that the Civil War or something, and then I start talking about Walt Whitman, it's like, okay, well, the kids can see that connection. Like, it's not that weird to throw Walt Whitman at them when I'm talking about the 1850s and 1860s. But again, when I'm showing up brand new and all they know is we're talking about this 150-year time period, that's all I know. Well, you've got to lay a lot of foundation before you get kids to get on board with you. And so even at the college level, it takes 15 minutes, at least I felt like, to walk these kids through those steps so that now they're ready to hear what I'm actually going to teach them about. And then beyond that, when they have to go do a little bit of homework, they can hopefully tackle it fairly comfortably and even willingly. Maybe with my explanation, they'll actually kind of want to do this. And sure enough, that Thursday when we had our next class, which was much more of a seminar style with smaller groups, we had really good discussion, surprisingly. But I think this is why these things can work, is you've got to lay the foundation and present a lot of background knowledge and make it relatable to them that, this is part of their life. They don't think about it very often, but it actually is kind of normal to think symbolically and to use metaphors and all the language that's used, and to see how language and literature and art evolve over time. Like, this is actually pretty normal. So there's nothing to be scared of. You can do it. I trust you. I'm going to explain it as clearly as I can, and this is how you do it. So, like I said at the top, there's a lot of instruction out there, and it's well intended and it's usually fairly helpful. But it's a lot of here's what to do, and not enough here's how you do that, and here's why I did that. All right. And so I'm gonna try to offer some of these whenever I can. I don't have a lot of stuff filmed, and I know a lot of other teachers don't either. But I think this is just way more helpful than reading another article about the science of learning, and just more information about the usefulness of background knowledge for critical thinking. It's like, yeah, all that stuff's true. That's great to know that. But what do you do with it? How does that show up in your class, actually? Well, we need some modeling. We need some examples from people who are good at this. And again, I'm not saying I'm the best. I'm certainly not the best lecturer, probably. This isn't, lecturing is not my favorite thing. But based on my student response and the other teachers who come to watch me, they're like, whoa, that was pretty good. So, I've been doing this a long time. I know how to do this. And again, when you get enough practice, you just do it naturally. Like, I don't have a bunch of notes written down. I probably had, like writing most valuable invention, symbolism, how kids are involved in symbolism, and then poetry, and then Emily Dickinson. Like, I just wrote down those words, and I knew in my head that's the chain that I'm going down. Those are the breadcrumbs I'm using to guide the kids along before I give them the real lecture. So, a little practice and it's not that hard. But again, I think we need to see people doing it and then analyze how it's done, just like we do with anything else. You watch, as an athletics coach, this is why you show kids film, is to say, okay, here's what you're doing. Here's why that was good. Here's why maybe it wasn't so good. But if you're not analyzing how it's done and you're just telling them the what, oh, go do this on the basketball court, go do this on the football field. It's like, yeah, you need to see it in action, though. It's way more helpful. And so hopefully, this is somewhat interesting and useful for you, especially if you are a teacher or if you're a parent and you don't have as much background of being an educator. This all might be very new to you. So you need to see some examples. And so I hope that's helpful as well. But, like I said, I'll keep trying to put a few of these out if I can find some old video footage. But let me know if you have any questions. I'm willing to help anybody become a better teacher because, we need good instruction, but it's not enough to just tell people what to do. I'm trying to show you how to do it. Like I said, I have a written version from last Thursday of a completely different lesson. Here's a video one, and hopefully I'll have some more for you in the future. Thanks for watching. See you next time.